A car drives down the dark and isolated road in the middle of the woods. Driving the car is a man named Jason, with his wife, Nikki, in the passenger seat. Nikki has some documents, photographs of a mansion, and an old ring in her hand that she wears for a while. The car stops at a desolate location which is so dark that the car's headlights are the only light source illuminating the road ahead. There is a sign on the side of the road that reads Cooper's Cross. Nikki pulls out a map from an envelope and estimates that they must have reached their destination. They assume that the house that they're looking for must be a little ahead toward the right, so they continue driving. However, they drive back to the sign they just passed by and it seems like they're just going around in circles. Then, the engine of their car breaks down all of a sudden, causing them to grow frustrated. Jason gets out of the car and walks away from it to get a reception on his phone. Nikki is left alone in the car when she stares out into the foggy and creepy woods. They are both alarmed when they hear the distant scream of a woman. Jason tries one last time to get some signals on the phone and Nikki toys with an old key in her hand before Jason gets back inside the car. He proposes the idea of spending the night here and sleeping in the car because they have no other option. They don't have any fuel or cell reception, so they'll have to wait until the morning to find a garage and get back on the road. It's finally morning, and the fog is still lurking around the bleak woods. Jason is fast asleep while Nikki stares emptily into the distance. Jason wakes up around 7 in the morning and complains about his back hurting from sleeping uncomfortably last night. Nikki, on the other hand, hasn't slept at all because it was too cold. Jason decides to go out and find out where they are by looking for a place nearby. Nikki is concerned about him getting lost, but he doesn't want to be stuck here forever. Nikki also steps out of the car to join him and takes the key along with her. There are strange totems tied to the barren branches of the trees that the couple fails to notice. After walking for a short while, they see the house they were looking so desperately for last night. An old man quietly watches them go inside from the woods. Jason and Nikki look around the Harbor Inn and Nikki catches a creepy old man staring at them through a window from inside the building. She tells Jason that there is someone upstairs and gives him the key to unlock the house. Jason is struggling to unlock the door when an old woman named Maddie approaches them. She mistakes Nikki for someone named Rebecca and tells the couple that the villagers have been expecting their arrival. She comments on how Rebecca hasn't changed at all and compliments the ring she's wearing on her finger. Maddie remembers Kit wearing this ring and how stunning it looked. Maddie also answers their question about the mysterious inhabitant of the house, Arthur. He moved in here after his wife perished, and the neighbors have been trying to get rid of him ever since then. Jason asks Maddie if there's a garage nearby, but she takes them to her own house instead. She claims that she can provide them with petrol for their car. She invites them over for breakfast too, but they politely turn down her offer. She continues to act in a shady manner, looking at Nikki strangely and touching Jason more than needed. The couple feels queasy after their meeting with her, even though she shows excitement for the pub to be back up and running again. On their walk back to the car, the man who had been watching them from the woods also talks to them. He introduces himself as Charles and assumes that Nikki is Rebecca too. He smiles and chuckles at them while Nikki nervously hides her ring. Jason later instructs her to not be so obvious. Jason is still not able to fix his car and get it running, so he shouts profanities in frustration. He pulls out their suitcases from the trunk and gives one of them to Nikki so that they can walk back to the pub. Nikki waits at the pub while Jason goes to Maddie's house to return the petrol container. The door to her house squeaks open by itself and Jason lets himself in. He hears passionate moans from upstairs and chuckles mischievously until he hears a beastly growl. However, the inappropriate noises continue to get louder, so he goes back to Nikki and cheekily tells her about what he just heard. Nikki doesn't find this funny but rather gets disgusted when she hears about this. Jason takes this opportunity to taunt her about their non-existent sex life. They finally go inside the dusty and abandoned building and remove the sheets from the furniture. Inside the mansion, Nikki looks at the picture of an old man with a stern expression holding 2 twin babies in his arms. They hear a thump on the ceiling and go upstairs into a room. Jason wants to use this room for their stuff once they've kicked Arthur out. He calls out to Arthur but gets no response. On the other hand, Nikki doesn't want to stay here and walk to the nearest town even though they're in the middle of nowhere. She reminds Jason of his promises that this would be easy, but she doubts that anyone would ever buy this place. The building is a dump, the village is a ghost town, and she wants a home. She wants a proper place to live and raise a family with Jason. He explains to her that selling this property will be their ticket to settling down together, but she storms out of there angrily. She runs into Maddie and Charles at the door just when Jason has also come after her. They are carrying something for Rebecca and apologize for coming to them at a bad time. Jason changes the topic by talking about Arthur, who isn't leaving. Maddie makes him feel flustered by calling him out for not knocking before coming inside her house. Nevertheless, she invites the young couple to stay at her house until Monday. Rebecca politely rejects their overbearing offer, but accepts the bedding they've brought for them. Arthur looks down on all of them from a window upstairs, and Charles expresses his desire to have a look around the house. Maddie elaborates that Charles has a lot of fond memories inside the old Harbor Inn. Once they're inside, Charles deeply inhales to take in the smell of the house when Arthur didn't used to be around. Maddie remembers how good of a woman Rebecca's aunt was, and how sad it is to see her place like this. Charles plays some eerie notes on the piano and recalls that this place used to be filled with people in the old day. This made the owner very rich according to Charles, but Maddie interrupts him. They leave Nikki and Jason be, and take their much-awaited leave. Another villager, Vince, cuts a lot of firewood and gathers it in his garden in a pile. Jason and Nikki hear a bell tolling in the distance, and Jason tries to revive their original plan. He wants Nikki to stick to their initial plan, but she's scared that the people might find out that she's not Rebecca and call the police on them. She is also concerned about the possibility that the real Rebecca might show up. Jason opens up to her about how he has nothing to show for it even though they left the town 15 years ago. All he's had in life is rejection and failure until this opportunity came up. He believes it to be their only shot at a happy and comfortable life, and all they have to do is sit it out. As for Arthur, he won't be a problem for them anymore. They'll be out of here in a few days, and they'll pretend to own the place if he says anything. They don't know at this moment that Arthur is eavesdropping on their conversation and knows about their fraud. A woman called Jenny had given Jason the documents for this house along with the ring. She advised Jason to make Nikki wear the ring at all times because Rebecca used to wear it too. The sun sets and Jason cuts up firewood with an axe to have some heat throughout the night. Arthur calls him out on using his axe and almost attacks Jason with his cane. Nikki gets there just in time for Jason to introduce her as Rebecca, his wife. Arthur insinuates that something is about to begin and that they chose the wrong place before slamming the door in their faces. Jason is ready to make an offer to Arthur but gets no response from him. Meanwhile, Nikki is confused about what the deranged man just said. They are finally able to light up the fireplace and sit by it when they hear a knock on the door. Jason answers the door to reveal their crazy old neighbors standing outside. Maddie, Charles, Vince, and his wife Emily have brought the young couple some food and lanterns. Jason lets the group in and introduces Vince and Emily to Rebecca, who feels very uncomfortable right now. Charles pulls out a bottle of vintage malt and Jason brings some glasses to drink it. But the glasses are covered in dust, so Maddie and Emily take it upon Themislevs to wash the glasses for the men. They take Rebecca to the kitchen with them where she stands in a corner while they wash the glasses. Maddie mentions that Rebecca was 5 or 6 the last time they met and Rebecca answers vaguely. Maddie notices the irritation on the finger on which Rebecca is wearing her ring and shows it to Emily. They question Rebecca about how long she's been wearing this ring and she feels anxious, not knowing what to say. Luckily, the men call out to them to bring the glasses and the subject changes. Rebecca doesn't drink and stays away while Jason mingles with the group. They hear the thump from the ceiling again and collectively curse Arthur. They are all glad to see Jason behind the bar, but Rebecca has a weird feeling about it. She can feel Charles staring into her soul and conveying her a message that he's looking forward to their time together. Jason observes the horrified expression on her face and checks up on her, but she doesn't say anything in front of them. They all leave after having a fun night at the inn until Jason shows them out. As soon as they're out, Nikki shares her suspicion with Jason that Charles knows the truth. Jason thinks that she's just overthinking and perceives their weird neighbors to be old and bored people. Jason comforts her by kissing her, but she withdraws and shuts herself in the room. She writes in her diary about how she felt like their neighbors were playing games with them and are onto their scheme. She doesn't understand how Jason is so clueless about all this, and questions why Jenny didn't mention anything about Arthur living here. She feels very wrong about all of this and doesn't want to wait this out anymore. She has decided to leave tomorrow and Jason will have to join her if he truly loves her. Nikki hears some rhythmic creaking and steps out of the house in the dark of the night. Holding a lantern in her hand, she peeks into the fog and enters a shed. She comes across a toilet and closes the door to use it. She hears a noise nearby while Jason is playing piano inside the house. Nikki hears the voice of a man uttering her name and screams to Jason for help. He immediately runs to help her and finds her inside the toilet. She cries and finds comfort in his arms. Surprisingly, Maddie also gets there to check up on them. She assumes that it was probably a deer or a fox that scared Rebecca. Maddie waits with Jason outside while Rebecca finishes her business in the toilet. She brings up that Rebecca is very lucky to have such a young and strong man protecting him, touching him seductively. Rebecca comes out of the toilet before things can escalate and Maddie backs off. Once they've locked the doors to the inn, Nikki confronts Jason about what he was doing with Maddie. When she doesn't get an answer, she declares that she'll leave tomorrow because she doesn't care about the money anymore. She is so adamant about this that she'll break up with him if he doesn't support her decision. Meanwhile, Maddie hums to herself late at night while making another totem. Arthur dreams of Rebecca going up to the attic of the house to wear a demonic headpiece. He then sees Rebecca going into the woods with a beast. Among all the villagers who watch the beast fraternize with Rebecca. The beast's roar wakes him up from his nightmare and he sobs while looking at an old photograph. Nikki sleeps peacefully beside Jason while the ring on her finger slowly rots her skin. All of the creepy villagers await the impending doom of the night in this cursed town. The next morning, Arthur stands mournfully beside a grave where a girl named Anna is buried. Jason warms up the place with fire and sits down with Nikki to have the breakfast their neighbors left behind last night. He informs her that they'll leave later today, because he finally agrees with Nikki about this place. They kiss and then Maddie and Charles come inside the house. They've brought them some hot tea to go with their breakfast and invite the young couple to a welcoming party that the villagers have organized for them. Rebecca doesn't even acknowledge them, but they continue to talk about the party this evening. Before leaving, Maddie hands Jason the key to her house because she will be at Charles until lunchtime. Once they've gone, Nikki expresses her relief at the fact that they're leaving this crazy town. But Jason has another one of his twisted ideas to make money. He wants to attend the party and steal a few things to pawn later. He opens her eyes to the reality that they're broke. While drinking tea, Nikki notices the framed photograph hung on the wall again. She points out that the old man in the picture holds a striking resemblance to Charles even though the photo is really old. She doesn't like the way he looks at her, but Jason argues that it's natural because she's so beautiful. She reciprocates his flirting but soon realizes that he lacks sincerity. So she bails out of the house, slamming the door behind her. Meanwhile, Jason looks at the key to Maddie's house lying on the table. Anna walks in the forested area near the house and feels like she's being watched. She stumbles upon Anna's grave and gets startled when she finds Arthur standing behind her. Arthur reprimands her for coming here and she argues that she had to come after inheriting the pub. He declares that no one inherits the Harbor Inn and that her name isn't really Rebecca. Nikki insists that it is, but he warns her that all the villagers are waiting and watching. They plan to do something terrible and she foolishly walks right into it. He directs her attention towards her hand, which is halfway rotten now. This sends a chill down Nikki's spine while Arthur reiterates that it has started. He walks closer to her, claiming that he can help her, but she flees instead. Arthur yells after her, trying to make her aware that she can't run away. Once he's by himself, he mutters that no one escapes from this hellhole and glances at Anna's grave. On the other hand, Jason enters Maddie's empty house with totems hanging by the entrance. He calls out to see if anyone's home and doesn't get a reply. So he goes upstairs and comes inside an empty room. The only thing inside this room is an old white dress hanging on a mannequin, with some jewelry made out of wood branches, just like the totems these villagers make. Jason inspects it closely and sees some bones on it too. His gaze shifts to some fancy jewelry lying around on a dressing table and he picks it up. When he walks away, Maddie's reflection in the mirror is clearly visible even though she doesn't appear to be inside the room. Jason proceeds to another room which has numerous totems hanging from the ceiling, and this slightly unsettles him too. He inches closer to the window and witnesses a stake emerging from the ground, surrounded by firewood. It appears to be a fire pit in Maddie's garden. Jason is further terrified when he is blindsided by a ghastly gust of wind that shoots into the room out of nowhere. He carefully exits Maddie's house and calls after Nikki, who has gone back inside the inn. Jason runs after her, failing to see Emily's figure peering out of the window. Jason finds Nikki in a panic because Arthur knows about them. She shows him her afflicted hand and he takes her to the sink to run her hand under hot water. He tries to get the ring off her finger, but it doesn't budge. Nikki feels physically drained and really weak at this point and lies down, worrying Jason. She regrets coming here in the first place, and for once, Jason agrees with her. He asks if she can leave, but she desperately needs some sleep. She informs Jason about them being in danger from the villagers before dozing off. Jason tries to think while moving the gold bangle he stole from Maddie's house in his hand. Jason hears wood creaking and a man sobs, so he tries to look into Arthur's room. However, Arthur almost cuts his face off with a knife he holds in his hand for self-defense. Arthur shouts at Jason for not understanding that he has been played just like he was, many years ago. Later that evening, Jason gets ready in the lantern's light to attend the party while Nikki mumbles in her sleep. At the gathering, Charles raises a toast to welcome Jason and Rebecca. He emphasizes how important their arrival was to rekindle the village charm and bring new life. Nikki wakes up from her slumber while Arthur sharpens the blade of his knife, trying to ignore the chatter and laughter from the party. Maddie takes her leave from Jason, after which the room starts to spin around him. He still lets Vince pour him a glass of champagne and gulps it down, feeling its intensity. This is when Rebecca enters the room, still a little groggy from her sleep. Emily comforts her, saying this won't last long. Nikki is alarmed to see Jenny join the party all dressed up in dark clothing and makeup. She kisses Charles and Nikki tries to show her true colors to Jason. Unfortunately, he is too intoxicated to understand anything at this point. Nikki heads back inside her room and quickly packs her bags. She grabs her car keys and a lantern, along with her bag, to get out of this place at once. Arthur tries to hold her back just as she is about to step out of the house. He states that it is not safe to go outside at this time, but she frees her hand off him and runs out. She explicitly orders him to leave her alone, but he still follows her into the foggy night. Meanwhile, the world around Jason has slowed as he speculates about the old manic villagers' party with Jenny. His head hurts and his body feels heavy as he tries to find his way back to Nikki. But Jenny catches up to him and drags him to a room. She throws him onto the bed, gets on top of him, and imposes herself on a barely conscious Jason. The villagers all watch quietly in a circle as Maddie, instead of Jenny, surfaces from Jason's body. She orders them to find Nikki. Nikki navigates through the woods and the fog to find a hiding spot. Arthur attempts to help her again and informs her that she won't be able to leave unless she gets her ring off. Arthur pulls out his knife, insisting that the ring has got to go. Nikki finds his insinuation horrific, but he implores that what they'll do to her will be much worse. He claims that the ring will consume her and that she must cut the finger that binds her to this village. Nikki runs off into the night to rid herself of his crazy talk, but she slows down and examines the ring and the effect it has on her hand. Arthur takes her hand to cut it off in order to rescue her. Simultaneously, Vince and Emily are sniffing around for Nikki and calling out to her like harrowing predators. Nikki appears phased when Arthur brings her to a shed. He wishes that he could have stopped her before she came to Cooper's Cross, stating that no one who comes here ever leaves. He recalls searching for Anna for days and doubts if cutting her finger off would work. Still, he wants to at least try to save her life. He is about to cut her finger when he hears whispers. Vince and Emily get to him and tie him to the stake. Charles wakes Arthur up to express how fun it was to watch him suffer. He reminds Arthur that he came to the village of his own free will, out of greed, just like Nikki and Jason. In reality, they were led here and can't leave because they were tied by the fate of the ring. The villagers have outsmarted the deceivers. Anna was a disappointment and a waste to them because she couldn't fulfill their purpose. They ensure their immortality by passing their seed to an infant born of a human. If they fail to do so, they'll wither and perish. The precious window of fertility comes with every 300 moons and it has returned tonight. Nikki is the perfect vessel who's intoxicated by the ring. If she gives birth to a child, they'll celebrate because it'll in the 6th hour of the 6th week, they'll drink the This will sustain them for the next 100 years. With a prayer to Satan, Vince and Charles set Arthur on fire. Inside the house, Maddie and Emily have dressed up Nikki in a white dress and wooden jewelry. For final touches, they smear red lipstick on her lips. Maddie then proceeds to plant the seed inside Nikki, and they let out sinister laughs when they discover that she's a virgin. Nikki wakes up with her body paralyzed from her torso to her feet. Charles comes into the room, with horns growing out his forehead and his face turning into one of a beast. The door shuts after him and all that can be heard are Nikki's gut-wrenching screams. The next morning shows Nikki's grave right beside Anna's. Maddie and Charles have a baby crying in a pram. A disheveled Jason looks at them from inside the inn, a perfect picture of horror. Just like Arthur,